With oil drilling in North Dakota and the Keystone Pipeline in the news, it becomes important to look at history and the lessons learned in the past. A major pipeline venture from America's past would be the Alaskan Pipeline. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline is a significant project to examine for lessons on how to protect the environment while transporting oil. When oil was discovered at Prudhoe Bay in 1968, a way to transport that oil from Alaska's northern slope to refineries in the south needed to be found. There were different methods that were discussed, but it seemed to the oil companies that the most economical way was to transport the oil was to build a pipeline. The pipeline would need to be built from the North Slope oil field to the Port of Valdez, 800 miles away. Many different groups voiced environmental concerns about the construction of the pipeline and its negative effect on Alaska's environment. In 1969, Congress passed the Environmental Policy Act. It required that an environmental impact statement be completed for any project that might have a significant impact on the quality of the human environment. A possible route through Canada was also looked at, but was determined not to be better environmentally. It was also noted that it would take 2 to 6 years longer to complete a pipeline through Canada. Prior to the pipeline being built, scientists went to Alaska to document the likely effects of the pipeline on the environment. They studied such things as the trail of animals, such as caribou, to determine how they behaved without any mechanical disturbances, and charted the routes of the caribou. They found that when an imitation of an oil compressor was brought into their environment, the caribou showed hardly any signs of disturbance. Since being built, the caribou have been further studied. Scientists have found that the effects to be minimal and have rarely observed failed crossings by the caribou. In fact, since the pipeline was built, herds have increased in numbers. Shipping the oil directly from Prudhoe Bay in tankers through the Arctic Ocean and down the eastern coast of North America or south through the Bering Sea was discussed, but it was concluded the environmental risks were much greater if this was done. The other option would have been to try to ship the oil by roads or rail. Negative aspects of these methods were pointed out. Road pollutants could cause plants in Alaska to be more susceptible to attacks of pests. Nitrogen oxide, which is a pollutant from vehicles, would harm the environment. Roads and also might open up Alaska to the transportation of other things, such as metals and other natural resources that could be developed instead of just the oil, thereby leading to further impact on the environment. Finally, both roads and railroads can be much bigger problems than a pipeline for animals that migrate. The project was finally authorized by President Nixon on November 16, 1973. The Arab oil embargo influenced the public to believe that a new source of domestic oil was important for the national interest of the United States. Alyeska, the company that built the pipeline, began laying pipe March 1975. The whole project was monitored and managed by Frank Mullen Jr., who died a couple of years after the project was completed at the age of 48. Mullen lived out of a helicopter during the construction and made each individual worker feel as if they were vitally important. There were many difficulties associated with building the pipeline, from the extreme weather conditions that were faced to the geological problems that had to be solved. There were also difficulties associated with the workers building the pipeline. The only way the 800-mile pipeline would be finished by the 3-year deadline was to build the pipe in 5 sections simultaneously. Even with such difficulties and opposition, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline began flowing oil on June 20, 1977. The cost of the pipeline ended up being $8 billion, which was considerably higher than first predicted. Although the environment could not be completely protected, the Alaskan Pipeline was designed in such a way to minimize any effects on the environment. Permafrost was one major challenge that was well tackled by the design of the pipeline. The oil was going to flow through the pipe at about 115 degrees Fahrenheit. If the pipe had been buried, as others had before, such high temperatures would thaw the semi-frozen ground around it, causing it to become unstable. Such unstable land could then sag, causing a risk of cracking the pipe. To avoid such risks, 420 miles of the pipe were built above ground. The pipeline that is above the ground is supported by vertical structures that are about 60 feet apart. There are also anchor structures located from 800 to 1,800 feet apart that hold the pipe in position. Between each of the anchors, the pipe can move side to side approximately 170 inches for thermal expansion and seismic movement. In the areas where the above-ground pipes might cause thawing of the permafrost, heat pipes were added. These heat pipes contain anhydrous ammonia and are topped with aluminum radiators. The post's function is to conduct heat away from the soil. The pipeline is also wrapped in fiberglass insulation. All of these measures keep the permafrost from melting. In soils that were stable, the part of the pipe was buried. The ditch in most locations is from 8 to 16 feet deep, with one spot buried as deep as 49 feet, and lined with a padding of gravel and soil fill material. The pipe also has zinc ribbons buried beside it to inhibit corrosion. Some of the buried pipe is in unstable ground, where elevated pipe would normally be used. These parts had to be buried for various reasons. One reason is highway and animal crossings. There are approximately 579 animal crossings that were part of the pipeline's construction. Another reason is to avoid the danger of rock slides or avalanches. Similarly, there are sections of the pipeline that are buried and refrigerated to maintain the frozen condition of the soil around it. Even though the pipeline was built to limit its effects on the environment, there have been incidences that have negatively affected the environment. The biggest of those concerns has dealt with the fear of oil spills. During the time the pipeline has been operating, there have been oil spills, although the largest spill did not directly involve the pipeline. Instead, it happened in 1989 when the tanker Exxon Valdez ran aground on Bligh Reef in Prince William Sound and spilled 257,000 barrels of oil, enough to fill 125 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The spill did extensive damage to the ecosystem of Prince William Sound. Because of the spill, 1,300 miles were coated with toxins from the oil. Wildlife deaths resulting from that spill included 250,000 seabirds, 2,800 sea otters, 300 harbor seals, 250 bald eagles, 22 whales, and countless numbers of salmon and herring eggs. After the Exxon Valdez spill, there have been stronger government regulations put in place. The qualifications for people who navigate oil tankers were raised, and vessels are now required to escort and guide the tankers while they are in Prince William Sound. The tankers used at that time are no longer used, and, since 2014, only double-hulled tankers now carry the oil. These tankers have reduced the likelihood for the kind of larger spill that happened with the Exxon Valdez. The incident involving the Exxon Valdez accounted for approximately 75% of all oil that was spilled that was associated with the pipeline. In fact, 4 out of the 5 biggest spills associated with the pipe have been from oil tankers and not the pipeline. Over the life of the pipeline, from 1977 to 2012, there was a yearly average of about 1,151 barrels of oil spilled directly from the pipeline. This compares to approximately 400 million barrels produced annually. Many, but not all, of the pipeline spills were small. Because of this, they were easily contained and cleaned up, and as a result, posed a minimal environmental threat. Another thing that continues to be a concern is the threat of earthquakes and the damage that might do to the pipeline. The pipeline was designed to withstand earthquakes measuring within 5.5 and 8.5 on the Richter scale. The pipeline does cross the Denali Fault zone. When the pipeline was built, it was built so that if an earthquake occurred, it could move 20 feet laterally and 5 feet vertically. This could happen because the pipe was on lowered risers that rested on elongated skids. In 2003, an earthquake that measured 7.9 had an epicenter 50 miles from the pipeline. The pipeline moved 7 feet laterally and 2.5 feet vertically. Some of the support members were damaged, but no oil was spilled. Another concern is the pipeline's age. The pipeline was only intended to operate for 30 years. Corrosion in the pipeline and the shifting of the permafrost may threaten the integrity of the vertical pilings that support the pipeline. The fact that the pipeline is carrying less oil per day than it used to slows the flow of oil, and that slowing allows the temperature of the oil to drop. When the crude oil slows, water dropout can pool in low areas, causing bacteria to grow, and that can lead to corrosion of the pipe. A study by the Alyeska Company concluded that 300,000 to 350,000 barrels of oil needed to flow daily during the winter to keep the pipeline operating safely. The future of the pipeline is probably uncertain. At the rate our country consumes oil, there will continue to need to be a transporting of oil until other forms of energy become more available. There is also a question concerning global warming and its effects. As of yet, the glaciers are not an issue, but their melting could cause the ground to soften and create problems for the piping. The pipeline was built to minimally affect the environment, and although there have been environmental effects, as of now, the pipeline is still the safest and most economical way to transport the oil from the North Slope of Alaska. Today, the Alaskan pipeline is recognized as a technological marvel, an energy policy success story that reduced American reliance on Middle East oil, and one of the most economically successful infrastructure projects in American history. It also helped to rebuild the Alaskan economy and make it one of the largest oil producers in the world. A positive outcome of the pipeline was that issues were explored and resolved prior to depleting resources, then cleaning up after it. Therefore, the most important lesson to be learned from the Alaskan pipeline is that solutions are best worked out before building something potentially harmful to the environment.